So if scene one placed us in the world of the supernatural, scene two is going to take us directly into the world of men. And so we open on this battlefield. Now Duncan is not necessarily at the battle, okay, and we understand that from the very first two lines of the play. He asks, "What bloody man is that?" upon seeing this captain that's walking towards him, and his son Malcolm, who's standing right next to him, says, "This is the captain, or this is the sergeant who fought against my captivity." Okay, and then he says, "Say to the king the knowledge of the broil as thou didst leave it." So this tells us two things. One, Duncan is not on the front lines of this battle. Okay, he is very far removed, far enough removed that people have to come and bring him reports to tell him what's going on. And two, he doesn't recognize his own people. He doesn't recognize who's fighting for him. He says, "What bloody man is that?" He doesn't recognize this captain that's walking towards him. That's dangerous for a couple of reasons. If you don't know who's fighting for you, then you don't know who might be fighting against you. So we're beginning to see Duncan maybe not as the strongest leader. Somebody in my White Day classes on Friday said that he seems very detached. I think that's a fantastic word for this. He seems very, very just removed, detached from his people. Now, the captain, when he comes on scene, at least in the filmed production that you will watch, has a very thick Scottish accent, so I would very much recommend kind of following along with the text. But basically what he's saying is that they're fighting against the merciless MacDonald, okay, and he tells us the merciless MacDonald there in line 9 was fighting against him. Now, MacDonald, he says, is a rebel, okay? We know this for a couple of reasons. In line 10, he says he's worthy to be a rebel. And then in line 15, showed like a rebel's whore. So what we know now is that MacDonald was one of Duncan's nobles. Okay, so this is a man who was sworn to protect Duncan, was sworn to be loyal to Duncan, and he has now turned against Duncan and has tried to overthrow him, has tried to gain his throne from him. So again, we're learning a lot about Duncan from that. What does it say about a king if his own men turn against him? Okay, but never fear, because MacDonald does not succeed, because brave Macbeth, the captain tells us, well, he deserves that name. Now notice, we've never met Macbeth. So now all we know about Macbeth is that he has some connection to the witches. We get that from scene 1. And here we have this captain saying that he's brave, brave Macbeth. Well, he deserves that name. And he goes on to say, disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution like valor's minion, carved out his passage till he faced the slave. So till he faces MacDonald. So he fights through all these people until he faces MacDonald, which ne'er shook hands, nor bade him farewell, till he unseamed him from the nave to the chops, and fixed his head upon our battlements. So listen to what Macbeth did. When Macbeth faces MacDonald till he faced the slave, which ne'er shook hands, nor bade him farewell. So Macbeth doesn't give him a chance to apologize, doesn't give him a chance to ask for forgiveness or to ask for mercy, till he unseams him from the nave to the chops. So what Macbeth does is he takes a sword. He sticks his sword into MacDonald's belly button and he pulls up. Okay? He unseams him. Nave being the navel, chops being up here towards your throat. Then he fixed his head upon our battlements. So he then, it's not enough that we cut him open. Then he takes his head off. He cuts his head off, picks it up, puts it on a stick so that everybody can see it. Now, we're thinking to ourselves, oh my God, this is horribly violent. This seems extremely cruel. I can't believe that this happened. And so we've got some characteristics here for Macbeth. We've been given that direct characterization. He's brave. But then we've been given all this indirect characterization with these actions. And oh my God, how could you do this to someone? And look at what Duncan says. Duncan, upon hearing this, replies with, "Oh, valiant cousin, worthy gentleman." Duncan values this in Macbeth. Duncan values his action, values his violence, values his cruelty. And so again, we can begin to make some judgments about Duncan there as well. But of course, the battle's not over, because it's a bad day to be the King of Scotland. It's just a bad day. So then the captain tells us, Mark, King of Scotland, Mark, we're at line 28 there. No sooner justice had, with valor armed, compelled these skipping kerns to trust their heels. So no sooner had, Macbeth finished that battle, but the Norwegian lord, so the King of Norway, surveying vantage with furbished arms and new supplies of men, began a fresh assault. So the King of Norway now sees an opening, decides to swoop in and attack Duncan as well. Bad day to be the King of Scotland. We've got two attacks now. One from inside with MacDonald, and now one from the outside with the King of Norway. Okay, and so Duncan replies, dismayed this not our captains, Macbeth and Banquo. So that's the first time we hear Banquo's name. But Banquo was a noble as well as Macbeth. Okay, so they're very much equals. The fact that we hear their names together lets us know, okay, they fight together. Maybe they're friends. We're actually going to see them together again in scene 3. So we begin to connect those two names together as well. And the captain just laughs and says, yes, as sparrows the eagle or the hare the lion. So basically saying, no, of course they weren't upset that Norway attacks them, because it's Macbeth and Banquo and they're amazing and they can kill anybody. In fact, in line 40, he says that they meant to memorize another Golgotha. Well, now that's a biblical allusion, and you know what Golgotha is. You understand that allusion. Golgotha, of course, is the hill where Christ is crucified. It's the hill of blood. And we're told here that Macbeth wants to recreate it, okay? So we definitely know that Macbeth is not only a very skilled soldier, but he's a very bloodthirsty soldier. Very extreme in his roots, so to speak, okay? So the captain says, I'm feeling faint, my gaseous cry for help, and so Duncan says, get thee to a surgeon, and, he exits, and then, 2 other nobles come in, Ross and Angus. And so when they come in, they're bringing more reports. See, again, it's this idea that Duncan's not there. He's waiting for people to come and tell him things. So Ross says in line 48, from Fife, great king, where the Norwegian banners flout the sky and fan our people cold, Norway himself, with terrible numbers, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, the Thane of Cawdor. Okay, now I realize that name is spelled C-A-W-D-O-R, but we're not going to show our Kentucky here and pronounce that Cawdor. Okay, it's not Cawdor, it's Cawdor. Doesn't that sound more elegant anyway? So it's Cawdor. So we learn that another of Duncan's nobles, the Thane of Cawdor, and that word Thane, T-H-A-N-E, it's like calling someone a lord, okay? It's a title. Okay, so it's the Thane Macbeth, or the Thane Banquo, the Thane MacDonald. So all these are Thanes, okay? But we learned that the Thane of Cawdor has been helping the King of Norway. So this is the third person who's attempted to kind of take over Duncan's throne here. And again, it's this idea of being a traitor, of being a rebel. So we've got 2 people from Duncan's, trusted nobles who have tried to take his throne from him. So we know that the Thane of Cawdor has been helping Norway, okay? But in line 54, we're told, till that Bellona's bridegroom, okay? Another name for Macbeth. So we're again hearing how great he is in battle. Lapped in proof, confronted him with self-comparisons, point against point, rebellious arm against arm, curbing his lavish spirit, and to conclude, the victory fell on us. Okay, so because of Macbeth, they were able to defeat Norway, and so Scotland is victorious. Now Macbeth does not necessarily know that the Thane of Cawdor was the one helping the King of Norway. Okay? Duncan knows that. These other nobles know that, but Macbeth doesn't really know that yet. So this is our first example of dramatic irony. You remember dramatic irony from last year. Dramatic irony, of course, is that idea that we, the audience, have information that the characters on stage don't have. And this is one of them. We know that the Thane of Cawdor was a traitor. was helping the King of Norway. But Macbeth doesn't really know that. He kind of thinks Norway was just working on his own. So then, look at what Duncan says. This is where things get interesting. Line 64. Go pronounce his present death, and with his title, greet Macbeth. Ross says, I'll see it done. And then Duncan says, what he hath lost, noble Macbeth hath won. And there it is, there it is. Did you hear it? Did you hear it? I'm going to say it again. What he hath lost, noble Macbeth hath won. And what does that remind us of? Well, it reminds us of the witches, right? In Act 1, Scene 1, when they say, when the battle's lost and won. And here we have those same words being used. So what are we learning here? What effect does that have on us? Well, we immediately begin to think these witches have some knowledge. They know kind of what's going on, and we begin to wonder, what else do they know? Okay, so obviously if they kind of knew maybe that this was going to happen, what else do they know? What else are we going to learn from them? So it kind of solidifies in the audience's mind that these witches, okay, they're the real deal. We really need to watch them. We also then learn that Macbeth is going to get another title. Okay, he's going to be given the title, the Thane of Cawdor. And Duncan's doing that as a reward for him. Thank you for saving my life 3 times in one day. You know, here's another title. I'm so pleased with you. But this is a title that belonged to a traitor, belonged to a rebel, belonged to somebody who turned against the king. Now we're going to place that name on Macbeth. And is there going to be any sort of comparison or crossover that's going to happen there? And we'll have to kind of see that. So this scene that you're going to watch now, like I said, the captain has this very thick Scottish accent, and he jumps around a little bit in his parts. He also faints at one part and then screams ridiculously, so feel free to laugh during that. But this does move fairly quickly, so enjoy scene 2, and then we'll come back together for scene 3, the last scene that we're going to do today.